So this class we're gonna try to have it more. I'm gonna share some of the sources, and this is called the Torah of Trees, 7 generations, and we're gonna try to cover part of the spiritual. Let me see. So I muted part of the spiritual aspect of the Torah on trees. Actually, going to cover the mitzvah that is related to not destroying trees, and maybe part of the calendar too. Should I speak up? Okay. Hold on one second. Okay. So, does everyone have the sources? Source sheet? I'm going to put it in there again. And I'm going to start. So this classes are part of ProScience Center Online, and you can go to prosciencecenter.org/online and see the rest of the sessions. Wilderness, gardening, Torah of the Earth, and a lot of other material. And this exact Zoom conversation is part of the Elements of Nature one, and Aaron is saying that the ProScience link doesn't work for him. Does the Safari link work for you? Okay. So we did earth, fire, water, and air. And now we're going to do trees. And in the description of in the other sessions, we talked about this primary image of that it runs through the Torah again and again and again, which is this primordial sea with an island or a rock emerging out of it, with the fire on top and the cloud or the doves flapping around on the center as like a refuge. And that visual, that is like the primary meditative visual in the Torah, runs through almost every story. So you see that same image in the Garden of Eden. You see the image in Noah's story where there's a big flood and there's a rock and there's a little dove on top, which is like the Shekhinah, the cloud. And you also, in there, you also see a tree. On top of that mountain or on top of that rock is sometimes visualized in that vision as a tree. And there's, just like in the Garden of Eden, there's a tree in the center of it. There's a tree in Noah's vision. In Har Sinai, there's the tree of light. And that theme of this like large tree sitting on top of the apex of the island, meaning the refuge, the rock of which life. Jennifer, the cat walking by is unbelievable, and it's so sweet. That refuge of that rock and that island, the refuge there is the tree sitting on top of the island. And so the Torah is referred to as a tree of life. Every Shabbat or every time the Torah is taken out of the Ark in a Jewish setting, everyone points with their little pinky finger and says, Eitz Chaim hi l'machazikim bo. So it is a tree of life to those who hold on to it. It's like the tree of life. The Torah itself is called the tree of life. So the Torah is the wisdom of trees, essentially. And I guess I can share my screen. Probably not true about having time doing any sources. I'm just going to sit here talking and talking, but just kidding. Okay, so here's the, there we go, share. You see it? Okay, so here's this primary image that runs through all the stories. It happens again with motion. It's near constant. Right there at the top of the Garden of Eden is like this tree. And when you go through the year, which we happen to be in this part of the year, and we're moving into Sivan, where we'll be at the top of the mountain, and we'll get the Torah. You get the Torah, i.e. the wisdom and the guidance, from the tree. And so the tree, the Torah is referred to as the tree of life. So basically, as you're moving through this part of the year, which is like the grass, which is like the rational mind, the mundane and sort of rational and realistic mind, rational in the sense of that it works for me. It's wisdom that works for me. It makes sense for me to work with it. Here you get the tree, and the year itself changes. So for these 3 years is the grass season, but now you sort of stand up and receive the tree. Here, these 3 months, I'm not talking about it in like a religious sense. So these 3 months are the beginning of the tree harvest. So the fruits, oh, I have the honor of both Schambergs here. You have this season starts the season of the trees. This is where the fruits of the trees come in. So as you move up the mountain, literally when you get to this part of the mountain, you receive the tree, which is the Torah is called the tree of life, and you get the wisdom of the tree. And the primary wisdom that the Torah is sharing is one of generations. So it gives you advice that maybe as an individual, you wouldn't necessarily find rational, but the trees teach us the wisdom that is beyond just thinking as our life, as beginning when we were born or the earliest memory that we have, and then when we die. But rather our life as a continuation that is much larger and longer and more perennial than just one season. Like a life can be considered a season, but trees go through many seasons. So sort of, it's like the wisdom of the ancients or the wisdom of the ancestors, wisdom that is perennial and goes through many generations and is not just about my life. So the primary story that we tell in the Jewish Midrash is of Choni Hamagel, who is walking along, and then he sees someone. I'm not going to tell the entire story, that is for another time, but he sees someone, and the person is planting a carob tree, and it's an old person. And so he says, why in the world, the carob trees don't give their fruit for 70 years. So why would you even be planting that tree? And so the person says to Choni and Margot, well, those carob trees that I'm eating, my grandfather planted for me. So I'm planting for my grandchildren, which is, it doesn't really make sense for me to do what I'm doing, but somebody did something that didn't make sense for them because they thought outside of their lives as the only thing that exists, but thought in a generational and a perennial sense, that lives are interconnected and that history passes through. Not history as far as like historical academic history, but like stories of life. So on the top of the mountain where Moshe receives the Torah, once he gets this wisdom and this guidance that comes from the trees, then he says, then he goes down with his 2 luchos, his tablets, and then he sees people are worshiping their own creation again, and he smashes the Torah on the floor, and then he goes back up a second time. And he goes back up a second time, the creator says, no, I'm not going to hang out with you anymore, because if I had to hang out with you, I'd just totally kill you. So I just can't, you're just too aggravating. So you'll have to go on your own without feeling the presence of the creator with you. And Moshe's like, no, that's not acceptable. I'm not going to go through life like that. So then he said, okay, fine, I'll go with you. And then once Moshe sort of gets permission for that, then he finagles the creator into giving him even more. And he starts arguing for more and more until he finally says, show us, listen, if you think you're going to get so upset at us, why don't you show us the way you operate, so then we don't have to get upset. I mean, you don't have to get upset, because why don't you just, instead of getting upset about everything, just teach us some of the way you operate. So then the creator says, okay, well, that's not going to work. I can't do that, because you're mortal and you can't see beyond your existence, because you just get blown away, because you can't see non-being if you're a being, right? So it's not going to happen. But I'll put you in a little tiny crack in the top of that mountain, little cleft of the rock, and I'll pass through, and then I'll call my own name. I'll call my own name. I'll call myself, and then you'll be able to see the process. And in the process, he says, Hashem Rachum Lechanim, Erech Apayim Brav Chesed Be'emetz Noser Chesed Be'alafim, that little song. And basically, the gist of that is the creator is teaching that he operates on a generational sense. So things that don't make sense in one generation are actually results of previous generations. And the reason why we're held so much and can make so many mistakes over and over again is that the world as it stands just allows for a lot of mistakes. But those mistakes sort of dissipate in waves into the future generations. And so you don't feel the immediate effect of a mistake, but it passes on into generations. So that gives him a little bit of an idea. But that idea is already the perennial and tree wisdom, that see life as like a family tree, and see different branches as coming to their completion at different times and moving through existence, and see life as a branch. And then in that story, then you'll see the way in which you'll see a different story, not just the story of your life, but the story of the tree. So that's just, okay, I think that's like a context to the beginning of just how important the tree is. And the tree of life is the tree of life itself, right? So everything, when you peer into creation and you sit in front of nature, aside from the fact that trees are all over the place, everything ends up looking like a tree. So your family, you have a family tree, and a river looks like a tree, and then you split open a body, you look at it and it looks like a tree, and ideas branch off like trees, and all of a sudden the entire world, when you're trying to hear what it's saying, it just keeps saying tree, 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 and then you say, okay, I get it, tree. So basically, if every single thing inside of every single moving object, and even things that are not alive, like quartz veins and rocks, end up telling you tree, then you go, okay, so tree, you're trying to tell me tree? So then what would life look like? What would the story that I give, where I would see the tree of life and everything? And then that tree of life is sort of like moving from the tree of good and evil, of seeing all these branches as either good or bad, seeing a life as good or bad, or trying to make choices and eat things and work with things as either that they're good or bad, or saying that I choose life. So the choices that I'm making are based on what brings life, what gives life, what is alive. And in that, that's what I'm going to prefer. Now, I'm not going to prefer good over bad. I'm going to prefer life. I'm going to choose life. And the Torah is that sort of tree of life where life takes precedence. The choice of life takes precedence over everything. So although there's many, many mitzvot and many commandments and all this talk about what you should and shouldn't do, for Jewish people, all commandments, all mitzvahs, all customs, and any wisdom basically gets put aside for life. Because the point of any of this guidance and any of this wisdom and any of these sort of advice is hold on. Any of the guidance or any of this life is trained towards growing and producing creativity and life, fecundity, growth. It's all for that. So if it came down to you need to, like, for instance, there's a lot of Jewish laws around eating. But if it's for life, you could eat anything. It's not a, if it's, and like there's no kashrut on medicine. So any medicine is kosher if it's to help life. And if your life depended on something, then everything is kosher. So all the advice is always aiming for life, and the sort of guiding principle is the growth of life, which is the tree of life. Okay, so I'm going to, somebody who wants to read one of the sources. Let's see.
I'll read something for me to read.
Oh, thank you, Tali. Do you see the first?
Can you put in the screen? Because I'm trying to. Okay.
Is that good?
Okay. Okay. Generation of the trees. Okay. Great. When from Deuteronomy 20:19 to 20, when in your war against a city, you have to besiege it a long time in order to capture it. You must not destroy its trees, holding the axe against them. You may eat of them, but you must not cut them down. Are trees of the field human to withdraw before you into the besieged city? You want to read?
Oh, that's good enough. What do you think about that source?
Can you put it just back up, so just to study it a little bit? So I can't access them.
Respect for trees.
It's really talking about respect. It's all about respect for the trees. I think it's a connection that if you can have the respect for a tree, then you would have also respect for a human being.
Well, that's actually really interesting because that verse over there seems to have no respect for human beings.
Right.
It seems like it's perfectly fine to be at war. It's
right,
like,
but to destroy trees.
When you're out warring, it doesn't comment about whether war. I mean, it might in another place might comment about war being bad, but here that's not the point. You're of course warring, but when you're warring, you for sure should respect trees. So there's a really interesting thing going on, which first of all, it gives personhood to the trees. Sarah says that trees give life to so many beings. And Tonya says trees above people. Stefania says when in battle, don't destroy life. I don't think trees is literal. It's like how you just described trees. It's everything that is life. Yeah, there is definitely something in there that already is hinting at that. It's like what's the assumptions that are going into that statement where um, trees are given personhood. So it's saying um, you're not at war with trees because they don't have, right? So they can't run back into the city. In other words, they can't run away from you, right? So it's not a fair fight. It's like going around fighting with people that, with, coming at someone with a sword and they can't run away from you. It's just cowardly. You're not like a warrior or anything. You're just chopping down trees. It's a, um, it's not, it's a war crime. And that's the most interesting thing, at least to me, about this series. Because during war, so many laws go out of morality. So when you're at war, you are allowed to kill, right? That's what
Right.
you're allowed to kill. When you're at war, you're allowed to steal. You are. That's what happens at war. When people move through a war front, they steal from the houses that they're moving through because they need the food and the whatever supplies they're getting, and they just take it from the houses. And afterwards, when the war is over, nobody comes and says, you did a war crime. You took stuff from houses. They don't say that. And if there's after a war, nobody says, you did a war crime, you killed someone, right? Because that's what war is about. So no one gets war crime. But here is saying, no, 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 this is war crime. If you, even while you're warring, you're not allowed to cut down trees. So it's giving trees some sort of, it's not just personhood, it's an unbelievable consideration that even during war, that doesn't involve the trees. You're not at war with them because you're not allowed to be at war with them.
So it's almost, is it saying it almost you're not in war with the land? Would you at war with those within the land?
What?
Saying, could it be, is it saying that you're not, by not cutting down trees, you're not at war with the land, but you're at war with the people on the land, because that's what they're doing. They're not cutting down the trees. The trees are part of the land.
Yeah, exactly. You're not allowed to start a war against the earth. That's the line. Like, if you start cutting down trees, you're basically declaring war on life itself. That's what you just did. You're like, I'm gonna cut down this forest. If you have no reason for doing it or no real reason to do it, then it's like you've just declared war on Earth, and that you're not. There's no excuse for. While here in the Torah, there seems to be sometimes where there's people have a valid reason to war with themselves, but it's saying you never have a valid reason to war against the earth, to lay waste the earth. And that's actually the word lo tashchit in Hebrew, kis satsor el ir yamim rabim, when you're besieging a city for a long time. Oh, it's even more funny because it's like they're there for a long time, so they need to like cut down the trees for their stuff. And like even when you're doing that, like not when you just come rolling in, you start slashing at trees, but even when you're there for a long time and you need them, lo tashchit, do not waste. Tashchit means waste. So there's a mitzvah in the Torah of Bal Tashchit, which is the mitzvah of wasting, and for us, the mitzvah is to waste anything. So, like when I was growing up, old people would, if you like had a glass jar and you decided to throw that glass jar into the garbage because you finished your pickles, someone would say, that's Bal Tashchit. You can't do that. You need to save that jar and you need to use it as a cup or something, but you can't just throw it in the garbage. And if you would take, I remember these things happening to me. If you would take like two pieces of paper and you drew on one of them and then you didn't like it and then you threw it away, but there was another piece of paper that was in the back of that piece of paper and went in the garbage too, they would say that's batash, it's avera, you're transgressing, and so you need to stop. And they would take the paper out. And if you like had a shirt that was worn out, if you had a shirt that was worn out and you decided that you were going to throw it away, they would also say that's bal tashchit. And what it means in English is to waste. And actually here, the Hebrew and the English are perfect. The linguistic connection between the usage of in English and the usage in Hebrew are exactly the same. In the sense that you lay waste to a city, like in a description of war, like you lay waste to a city and you waste things. It's the same tashchit. It means to waste something. So don't waste, and don't is like when you're wasting something on earth, you are laying waste to the earth. Also, that the trees can't withdraw before you, meaning they are rooted to the land, unlike people who can be mobile and get away. Yeah, exactly. Who wants to read the second source?
I can do that.
Yeah.
All right. Only trees that you know do not yield food may be destroyed. You may cut them down for constructing siege works against the city that is waging war on you until it has been reduced.
Oh, where is that?
Is that the one right after what we just read?
That's interesting. Do you see the one that says Rashi, number 2?
I don't know, I'm on Safaria, if that's how you say it, and it was after the one that was just read.
Oh, wow. Is it this one?
Sharing your screen.
This one?
No, it's definitely not that one. Interesting. I can read that one though, now that you have it up.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's probably something that I deleted. I like 20 of them, and I just delete them, and then figured which path of these sources we could go through today. So that's probably why I deleted. So pay it no mind. Don't even think about that.
All right, will do.
I think it is basically saying there is a caveat, whereas if the tree is no longer bearing fruit, you could cut it down. But we won't get into that, at least for now.
All right, so here we go. For is the tree of the field a man, that it should be besieged by thee? Has here the meaning of possibly, perhaps. Is the tree of the field perhaps a man who is able to withdraw within the besieged city from before you, that it should be chastised by the suffering of famine and thirst, like the inhabitants of the city? Why should you destroy it?
So Rashi is trying to clarify what the tradition on what that verse would mean, which is sort of what we got to. So could you also read the third one?
Sure. You
So
shall not.
sorry, this is Sifri Devarim, and this is part of the Midrash, and it's a collection of Midrash, and it's from like around 2,000 years ago, from the same time as the Mishnah, and it's commentary.
You shall not cut down its tree by wielding an axe against it. This tells me only of iron, an example, an axe blade. Whence do I derive the same for destroying it by, diverting a water course from it? From you shall not destroy its tree in any manner.
So here the commentary is, someone could say is a stretch, like, no, the commandment is only for cutting down a tree. But he's saying, no, that would be a very wrong literal reading of it, to think that it's just talking about cutting it. But if you if you diverted its water source, then you're also destroying it, right? So it's not just by cutting it down. So then it's extending that verse to mean that it's a war crime to divert, like for instance, if you have a canal, or if you have a river and you cut off that river, that's giving life to all the way down the river, and you divert it for yourself or whatever, then it's like you're attacking the trees down the river, right? And that's essentially the same thing. Who wants to read the next one? Sarah Robin.
The Torah warns us not to destroy something value, not just fruit trees. If you have a non-fruit tree that is more worthy than a fruit tree, you should cut the fruit tree first. From here we learn that the Bal Tashchit prohibition from the Torah applies to all sorts of things, not just fruit trees.
What comes up for you with that one?
It's like a practicality thing. Like both for you and for like what you're receiving from the earth. Like that there's values, there's things that are of value to us as people, and also things that are of value to like ecosystems. And that like it's not saying like you can just like take, but like if you're in a situation that like you need to take into account like the different values of all of the things that you need from the earth, I think.
So it's extending it outside of a tree.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first commentary is like, don't just think this is a single act of taking an axe or a sword and chopping down a tree. Any way you kill a tree is called wasting a tree, right? So when it was saying there's a war crime called chopping down trees during war, it wasn't just talking during war. If you can't do it during war, you certainly can't do it when everything's fine, and you can't go around wasting life. And it's not, and now it's expanding it. It wasn't talking, that was just an example. It wasn't talking about axing a tree, anything. And now it's saying, this commentary is saying, and it wasn't just talking about a tree, right? So then, who wants to read the next source? That would go to one of the comments in the chat about how life is like the tree of life, meaning that anything in life that's being wasted, you are wasting the tree, right? If you're wasting life, you're wasting the tree. But who wants to read the next one? Ooh, so many people. Adina?
Sure. Is this on Shabbat? Is that where we are?
Yeah,
Okay.
this one.
One who covers an oil lamp causes the flame to burn inefficiently, or uncovers a chrysonial lamp, allowing the fuel to evaporate faster, violates the prohibition of Baal Tashlich.
So what's the extension there? Now, which one is this one extending? I don't even know if I'm using the right word, like opening the definition. Waste not, right. So it's extending it. It's not even talking like you. Okay, it's not axing any type of wasting. And now in the Gemara, which is in Shabbat, it's talking about like also like Sarah says is indirect, right? It's talking about it's not just you wasting. You didn't even like you're not wasting. You're using it, but you're using it inefficiently. Even that is a waste. If you haven't, if you're sort of like sloppily using it without care. Now, the interesting thing about these extensions is that expansions is that they're not so weird to expand it to this because of this setting, which is that it's so important it's even a war crime. So it's not like the commentators are being like liberal with their expansion of this. It's clear that it's import. And then finally, the last one. Who wants to read that one? Oh, Sam. Okay.
I can continue if you want.
Okay, you read the next one. It is so, I'm so happy to be reading with everyone. Okay. So the next one is the Shulchan Aruch Harav, which is a Shulchan Aruch is the code of Jewish law, which is of course called the set table, because Jewish people like to eat, and nice. It's called the set table, and the Shulchan Aruch Harav means the set table of the rabbi. The rabbi being the Alter Rebbe, and he redid the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, to try to update it according to around 200 years ago. So, I guess Dina, you want to read this one?
Okay. Anyone who destroys a vessel, tears clothing, destroys a building, closes a well, wastes food or drink, or ruins anything that is fit to be used, has transgressed the prohibition of do not destroy trees. Wow.
Why? Why did they? How did they just do that? How did somebody who tears their clothes waste trees?
Like for what purpose? Like you're interrupting the purpose of what it was for, and now it can't be used for that anymore.
Oh, yeah. So it had its. I think that's very interesting. So Adina, you're saying that it has its purpose now. This little creator, this shirt and whatever, and now you're ruining it. I want to hold on to that until we get to the Rambam, which is really interesting. Stefania says that trees give life to all. So one way you could read that is just literally, like trees are literally giving, if you look at what they do, they're literally giving life to everything. All life on that rock, even the soil itself that the trees are growing out of, are old trees. And all of life sort of clings to these trees and is being given life by the trees. The oxygen that they're giving, the fact that they bring moisture up from the beach and bring it onto the continent. If the trees weren't bringing the moisture onto the continent, all the continents would just be a big giant desert besides from the shoreline, right? they literally are carrying water. They're called the water bearers. They literally carry water off the shore, cover it in the continent, then put the soil, which is their own bodies, on the earth, and then feed everything. They're like literally life. So in some level, when you take any of these things and you trace them back, you're destroying trees, you're destroying life. And that's just on a literal level. And then if you take it as the tree of life, then all life is inside of all life, wasting any life is wasting the tree, like with a capital T. So Uriel says that the way we say blessings on food, if we didn't, it's like we're stealing. So we have no rights to misuse anything, right? So it's like it's ingratitude. Okay, exactly. Who wants to read this larger one? Oh, maybe I'll read this one. Or does anyone want to?
You can read.
Oh, Jennifer. Yay. Okay, so Sefer Chinuch is an interesting book. Most history on Jewish books, most Jewish Sfarim, like these type of sorts of books, most of the time require not just an author, but they usually require, in Jewish tradition, an approbation by some other authors saying that they've read it and this is good stuff. It's true. It's sensible, whatever. It goes according to the tradition. So it can't just be one person saying it. It needs like an approbation. Sefer Chinuch is an anonymous work. And it's like sometimes there's like a pizza store that's so good it doesn't even need a certification or something like that. This book is just so good it doesn't even, like, no one even knows who wrote it, but it's so good. It doesn't need an approbation. Everyone goes, yeah, that's the one. And it's called the Book of Education, and it goes through each one of the mitzvot and it gives a source for it and a reason, and it tries to explain it. And the idea is that it's to explain these things to your kids. So here it is. You see it?
Yes. The root of this commandment is well known. It is in order to teach our souls to love good and purpose and to cling to it. And through this, good clings to us, and we will distance ourselves from all bad and destructive things.
We're talking here, just to make sure, we're talking here about the mitzvah of Bal Tashchit, of not wasting trees. Sorry.
And this is the way of the pious and people of proper action. They love peace and are happy for the good of the creatures and bring them close to Torah. And they do not destroy even a grain of mustard in the world. And they are distressed by all loss and destruction that they see. And if they can prevent it, they will prevent any destruction with all of their strength. But not so are the wicked, the brothers of the destructive spirits. They rejoice in the destruction of the world, and they destroy themselves. Since in the way that a person measures, so is he measured, which is to say that he clings to it forever, as the matter that is written, Proverbs 17:5. The one who rejoices in calamity will not be cleared of evil. And the one who desires the good and rejoices in it, his soul will dwell in the good forever. This is known and famous.
That's the best line there. This is known and famous. Right? I mean, it's known, it's famous. What did you think about that one? So he's trying to describe the mitzvah, and he's trying to give, it's his job in that book to give an ethic to it, right? So he's trying to describe what the purpose is, and he comes down really strong, no?
There's an unstated understanding behind like these pieces of text of like the fact that there is no waste in nature, that the creator has created all life to bring more life, so that even when something looks even when something dies, it's not wasted, that all life is turned into more life. And that we're the only ones who have like the ability and sometimes the desire to waste and to destroy. And like part of our purpose is to understand and come closer to goodness, and goodness is being close to the tree of life, which is the like love of this like cycle of life. The tree, capital T, and also just like trees in general are like a model for how like love and goodness and energy is cycled through a tree. It can be seen through the life cycle of the tree, and all things are modeled after it.
What do you think of that? A thumbs up. And also, Ariadne says, Talianne says that was beautifully stated. I think she said it in a private chat for me, but I'm exposing it. If you're a good person, you see both loss and destruction as cause for distress. So is it partly a test for how good of a person is? Yeah, so and I think in that source, he's like, oh, well, what's good and bad? So like one of the ideas is that you're choosing the tree of life. So instead of looking at things as good and bad, you're choosing life. That's what you're choosing, life. Like, I'm choosing life, that's what I'm choosing. And here, definitely in the Sefer Chinuch, he conflates the two, right? So it's like, you want a definition of good and bad? You want to do that little thing where you say, wow, this is good and this is bad? Here you go. Good is preferring life, and bad is loving destruction and trying to destroy everything and eventually destroy yourself. That's if you wanted that definition of bad. But he makes it into, it's not like just a normal good and bad where it's like some things are good and some things bad. It's like, that's life, you love life. And then bad means that you just destroy yourself for some reason. You're into that, and you just, and it's like, then he says it's just like the punishment in itself. Like you just, you love that kind of destruction and you go for it, and then you push yourself out of existence. So it definitely has that unstated ethic. So here we return to the Rambam, which I think we, last time we were able to have, I was making fun of him. So Maimonides, who's the sort of the greatest commentator of commentators, in his guide for the perplexed, he has this really interesting thing, and it goes back to what Adina said about wasting an object, which I think it fits here also. And he's giving sort of the same sort of ethic. The Rambam was before the Sefer Chinuch. The Sefer Chinuch is giving a commentary on the Rambam's list of mitzvot, but this is not in order. So intelligent persons. Okay, so the Rambam is a rationalist, and he always prefers intelligent people. Just saying his bias. He definitely thinks being intelligent is some sort of good quality, and he's always preferencing it. So intelligent persons are much perplexed when they inquire into the purpose of the creation. I will now show how absurd this question is. According to each one of the different theories, and he goes on to explain all of Greek philosophy, I consider therefore the following opinion as the most correct. And he he definitely feels like there's most correct opinions. He's the Rambam. To the teaching of the Bible, and best in accordance with the results of philosophy, all of philosophy. Namely, that the universe does not exist for man's sake. Does not. This world was not created for man's sake. And he thinks, the Rambam thinks, that this is most correct according to the Torah. That's the opinion of the Torah. And if you philosophized about it, you'd reach the same conclusion. But that each being exists for its own sake and not because of some other thing. So none of the beings and none of the creations here are here to serve another being. Every single being exists for itself, and it's not for man's sake. Thus, we believe in the creation, and yet need not inquire what purpose is served by each species of existing things. Okay, Uriel. So, okay. Each being exists for its own sake and not because of some other thing. Thus, we believe in the creation, yet we do not need to inquire what purpose is served by each species of existing things, because we assume that God created all parts of the universe by his will, some for their own sake and some for the sake of other beings. He's not contradicting himself in that. That include their own purpose in themselves. So he's saying, yes, it looks like some things serve another thing, right? Like it's the prey to that, you know, this animal eats that one, so it's there to serve it, but it serves a function of being food for another thing, but that's not the purpose of its existence. The purpose of its existence, it's for its own sake. In the same matter, as it was the will of God that man should exist, so it was his will that the heavens with their stars should exist, that there should be angels, and each one of these beings is itself the purpose of its own existence. So why is that like why is that important? What came up for you when you heard that? Nobody was created solely for the benefit of another being. And that would go also for like and if it has its own purpose, then like destroying something, like Adina was saying, like if it has a purpose to it, and has its little thing, you could even consider like a vessel or a shirt as not just something that was manipulated by people, but its own little creation. You know, it's a shirt now. It's a little shirt being. It has its own reason for existence, and if you just tear it into pieces, then you're wasting it. In the same way that like a tree has its purpose and a little frog has its purpose. Even like one of those little pliers is now a little being, and it took effort to make it. So he says that all life forms have innate value. So the value of a tree or other life form is not just its value to humans. So I think that's an extension of in the previous part where it's saying what's the value, right? If something has value, or it's of more worth and more value, then that takes preference. So in the Rambam, a value is not determined by its value to humans, right? But its value to the system, its worth, its value to the rest of the thing, not as like its service to man. Before we move on to this part over here, that concludes the flow of about, I guess, a couple thousand years of commentary on that waste war crime. And that's the flow. So in the Torah, it starts as a little comment that says, when you're at war, don't axe a tree because it can't run away from you. And then by the time you get to 2,000 years later, any sort of destruction of anything is now like you're warring with the earth. And it's like you're laying waste to earth and you're not allowed to do it. So even though that seems like kind of extreme, at least in our generation, it's starting to seem not so extreme. It's starting to seem like, no, that's not so extreme. When you're wasting things, really are, in each and every act, just making an attack. And thank you. I want to say it was quite beautiful. I thought it was quite beautiful too. This is a wonderful moment. So if you're making an attack, that's what you're doing. And so therefore, if you're wasting a shirt, then that is an equivalent of what you're doing. Or if there was a jar that came to you and it's worthy of being a cup, and then you just throw it out the window or something like that, then unless there was some purpose to that, then you've gone retroactively and made that whole process of the energy that went into it a waste. You've sort of wasted it. Okay, so now we're going to move to, is there anything that anyone would like to share? Okay, so we're going to go into humanity and trees. So the next source, which is on source 9, do you see the source? Is that good? Okay. So, Yivarech atam Elokim v'yomer lahem Elokim peru urvu. So, and God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and, okay, so I didn't change the translation to be literal like it should be. It says be fertile and increase, but actually in the Hebrew it says be fruitful and multiply. Peru is the same word as pre, to be fruitful and expand. So that is actually the first mitzvah. So like the number one mitzvah in the entire Torah is to be creative. That's it. And that's the blessing. So be creative. I'm going to move to the next source. And so that's the other reason why the tree of life, the Torah, is called the tree of life, is because at its core, the number one mitzvah that is like the trunk of all the mitzvot that are like branches off of it are to be fruitful and multiply, to increase life. That's your purpose on earth. Like, what's your purpose? What's our mission here? Why are there little people on the earth? It's to be fruitful and multiply, meaning to be creative. And that is understood as not just like creative as genetically creative, but creativity itself. So Hashem Elohim planted a garden in Eden, and in the east placed there an Adam, an earthling, who he formed. And from the ground Hashem Elohim caused to grow every tree that was pleasing to the sight, good for food, with the tree of life in the middle of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and bad. And Hashem took the earthling and placed him in the Garden of Eden, La'avda Shamra, to serve and to protect it. So this, if the Torah is understood as the story of the Jewish people, which it comes down in the seventh, by the seventh shepherd, it comes down to David and King David and the Jews, the tribe of Jews. That's the most here's the story of your tribe. But it becomes more and more and more meta until it goes to ancestors and ancestors, ancestors, tells more and more of the stories, ancestors, ancestors, you get to the ultimate ancestor, which is the most meta, early man, Adam, original, Adam Kadmon, original man. That's like the most meta story, like what is humanity? And so that story is the story of stories. And in the story of stories, there's a garden of trees. It's not just a garden of, it's not a garden of eggplants. The garden is of trees. It's an orchard. And nothing wrong with eggplants, aside from their nightshades and the, just kidding, I'm not macrobiotic. But the trees, it's like a garden of trees, and in the center of the center story of the Torah, so all stories are coming to a center story. In the center of that story, the point of the story is the tree of life. And in the physical center of that story's topography, is a tree. And what is the purpose of humans? To serve and protect the trees. That's the thing. So the meta story of what is like the meaning and purpose in human life, it's to plant trees and grow trees and tend trees and care for them, because the trees will do all the rest of the work. They'll create life, they'll give all that stuff. But the job of a person is to tend that garden of trees. So the linkage between tending the trees as the meaning of life and the purpose of creation is clear through the whole Torah. So in Kohelet Rabbah, which is a midrash on Kohelet, Shlomo's Ecclesiastes, has this story which says, look at God's work, for who can straighten what he has twisted? Which is actually a whole nother, I'm not going to go there. So when the Blessed Holy One created the first human, he took him and he led him around all the trees of the Garden of Eden and said to him, by the way, the Adam is at this point hermaphrodite. So it's this first man is a man and a woman together. So he took him and led him around all the trees of the Garden of Eden and said to him, look at my works, how beautiful and praiseworthy they are, and all that I have created. It was for you that I created it. What? The Rambam is freaking out. Anyways, pay attention that you do not corrupt and destroy my world. If you corrupt it, there is no one to repair it after you. So what is the idea of in the way of corruption? So in the most meta story is the story of the Garden of Eden. There's another creation story in the Torah, aside from there being two creation stories in Adam, but and the first one has two of them inside of it. But there's a whole nother one, which is Noah. It's the restart of the world. So the whole world gets saved in a little capsule, and then the world gets destroyed in a huge flood. Okay, I think we should do that. Do this really quick because it's cool. Okay, so here's the first day: light and darkness, sea and sky, earth and vegetation. Each one of these are being held up by like a little sukkah, like a little ceiling that is holding up. Keeping away all the darkness is this little sukkah of light. And keeping away the rain is this little sukkah called the rakia, which is like a little canopy that holds this up. And even this earth here, the trees are a sukkah themselves, right? So a sukkah is like a little hut with leaves on top, which is just like a tree canopy, which is like a canopy that is holding things up, holding structure, holding life to exist. And the little Shekhinah, the two little doves loving each other on top of that rock have a place to hang out in their little love canopy, which is this little sukkah. But the sky is a little love canopy where everything hangs out and makes love under, and that's the sky itself. And then light itself is like the most meta sukkah, little love canopy that is holding everything that is experienced at all. However, all those sukkahs are shaky. They tend to dissolve. And in Kabbalah, they're associated with the shaky letters, which is Bagad Kafra. And Ba turns to Va, Ga turns to Ja, Da turns to Va, Ka turns to Cha, Pa turns to F, Ra turns to Ra, and Ta turns to Tha. All of those sounds, they weaken, they fade. And the idea is that there's a very weak little sukkah of life that is it's a structure of life. And it's just inching out in this big oblivion of darkness. It's held up by this little flimsy little hut. And it's there really just to give a chance for love to be there under this canopy. But it's very ephemeral. It's just holding up. So light during the daytime, it's strong, but then it gets weak and darkness comes in. And there's a canopy that's holding back the water, but it also like breaks down a bit and water pours down from it. And the trees are the canopy that holds up life on the rock. And if they weaken, then all of life dissolves, right? And so in the flood, you have the weakening of all these canopies, where the canopy of light goes away, and the canopy that's holding up the water goes away, and the canopy of the vegetation, the trees go away, and all the life gets just wiped away, and darkness, and it goes back to this oblivion, like the potential of the womb, and the little sukkah is fallen, right? And then the first thing is that the dove, which is the Shekhinah, which is the two doves that are just looking for a place to love in this earth of being held up by a very flimsy little sukkah, they go and they find the trees. That's the first thing that the dove finds. It finds a tree, and now it lands, and then life gets to start all over again. So in that original story of Noah, let me see, life became wasted, and when life became wasted, then the sukkahs, the sort of structure and that's holding up life, gets wasted. And so it says, "V'tashchit ha'aretz," I'm going to source 13, "V'tishaches ha'aretz lifnei ha'elokim." And the earth became, and the translation here is, the earth became polluted before God, and the earth was filled with lawlessness. And when God saw how corrupt the earth was, for all flesh had corrupted its ways on earth. The Hebrew is that same word, tashchit, where it says don't cut down a tree, it says don't waste a tree. So if you're reading this, the earth became wasted, right? They were cutting down trees. And when they started cutting down these trees, the whole earth and all of life became wasted. It was like laying waste to life itself. And then all of a sudden, weather patterns changed, and all of the little sukkahs, the sukkah of the tree canopy, the sukkah of the water canopy, the sukkah of the light canopy started collapsing. And this little like gentle structure that was holding up life just fell apart. And there's that same word, tashchit. And if we link that up with the graveness of the mitzvah of don't waste, it's related to that, right? So it's like, oh, am I really, what damage am I doing when I'm cutting down a whole forest? Well, yeah, you literally are causing the very delicate balance of the structure that holds up this life. You're chopping down its foundations, and you are laying waste to the earth. So you're bringing on that flood. That's what these words are implying. And that becomes like a central theme in the Torah, which is to prevent that, to hold up the sukkah. There's actually a little bracha that we say in the benching, which is like the after gratitude blessing for food during Sukkot. which is that to lift up the fallen sukkah of David, that his sukkah also fell down, which is like, anyways. So here's another beautiful verse. This is number 14. And it says, when you enter the land and shall plant any trees for food. So even before, this is Leviticus, so the assumptions that are going into this. When human beings enter into a land, right, to settle it and to live in it, what does that mean for a person to move into a land? It means to plant trees. So it's assuming that wherever you move, your human activity is to, what is it to be a human, is to not, wherever you show up, you cut down all the trees. That would be the opposite of our mission in life. But that wherever human beings would go, they would be recognized by, of course, as the minute you move in, you're going to start planting trees. So when you do that, the first 3 years shall be forbidden for you not to eat, not to be eaten. And the 4th year, all the fruit shall be set aside for jubilation before Hashem. And in the 5th year, then you can eat it, and then you're going to have a Peru. You're going to have an increased creativity, right? So, and here you have a Jewish biomimicry, which is that when we don't cut the hair until 3 years, and just like a tree. And so no pruning. That's what it's saying, pruning, I'm sorry. It's not just picking, it's also pruning. You're not supposed to prune the trees for 3 years. You just let them grow wild, just like little boys. And then when they're 3, then you cut their hair, but you let them grow wild first. Also, the name for pruning excess tree branches is orla. And the Hebrew for orla means foreskin. It's the same word. So the excess branches are called foreskin, and foreskin on a male, well, it's called foreskin, and both gets removed because to remove excess male energy or to remove excess branches, which should be obvious, visual metaphor there, means to increase the life to where it's supposed to go. Because male energy in that idea needs to be directed properly. If not, it goes out into all sorts of directions. And to prune it means to give it more life, in the sense that when you have branches, if you allow the tree to just branch out in all directions, then it doesn't give as strong fruit. But if it's focused, then the fruit is healthier. Or it gives it at all, because it doesn't drain its energy on non-fruitful, non-living purposes. You know, it's pouring all its energy into life and not into other directions. Then it says, you should not eat anything with its blood. I don't want to get into all these things and how they're all connected, because we don't really have time. But and you should not practice divination or soothsaying. And then it says, you shall not round off the side growth of your head. Lo takifu pa'as roshchem velo tashchit es pa'as zikanecha. So you should not cut the side growths of your beard, and you shouldn't lay waste. And so the word is laying waste. So you have another, this is sort of like artistic biomimicry, which is that you shouldn't cut your beard, because your beard is like little trees and you shouldn't lay waste to them. You shouldn't cut them down. Just let them grow. That's the sort of like emblem of the idea there, that you should just let your hair grow. And then it continues on with all sorts of other stuff, and we could talk about that, but it's on 9:20 and I wanted to finish at 9:30, so we don't need to go into that. But the basic idea there is that if you start to look at how all of this builds up, the building up is that Jewish people are basically little tree people, that they're biomimicking tree branches out of their hair. The sign of the covenant is the sign of pruning. The first mitzvah is to be fruitful and multiply like a tree. The Torah is called the tree of life. The idea of any human habitation is to grow trees, and the purpose of humanity is to tend and care for trees. And so it's an overwhelming sort of tree love. The next one is, it says, even if you find the lands full of all good things, this is like a commentary, you should not say, oh, I'm going to sit here and not plant, right? So you might come into a land and it's got tons of nice stuff. So now I'm just going to sit here and I won't plant. Rather, be diligent in planting. As it says, you shall plant trees for food. Like that was that verse there. That the idea of a human is to be constantly tending and planting and increasing life. You shouldn't just sit around because it's good. Just as you came and found trees planted by others, you must plant for your children. A person must not say, I'm old, how many years will I live? Why should I get up and exert myself for others? I'm going to die tomorrow. So in the same way that when people came, there were some people that destroyed all their trees. I'm not going to say who, but there were some people that destroyed all their trees. And then they came over to, they got on a ship, and then they came over and they found a place that some people had like really taken care of their trees. So it's the opposite. You should plant trees, not go around taking trees. You should, wherever you go, you should plant trees, and you shouldn't say, oh, well, I have it good, because the only reason you have it good was because someone else planted trees. In other words, that's the like perennial tree wisdom that the Torah gives you, is you plant trees not for yourself. You're planting trees for the next generations. So you're always planting trees because you're always planting trees for the next generations. And you're getting the beauty of a tree because someone else planted trees for you. So life then becomes an expanded project of where you're in direct encounter with your ancestors and your descendants. And you're living in a tree of life with them. And you're feeling the benefit of your previous versions and the direct benefit. You're eating the fruits of their labor, and they're tending of a forest, and you're tending a forest for someone that you'll never meet. So in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, which is the best midrash, so if you ever want to read the best one, read Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. Every cool midrash is in there, and every weird thing usually shows up there. So 6 voices go from one end of the world to the other, and the sound is not audible. When a fruit-bearing tree is cut down, the voice cries out from one end of the world to the other, but no one can hear it. So it's like when a tree gets cut, I think I always say this, it always comes up to my head. I don't look at the video, it's terrible, but I one time saw a video on YouTube of a tree cutting machine that had an arm like this, and it grabbed the tree. It was like a whole living tree with branches and everything, and it had a circle of saws all around it. And it grabs the tree and it goes, and it cuts off all the branches. And then it goes, and it just cuts the tree. And it goes, lifts it up and then tosses it back. And actually, when I first saw it, tears poured out of my eyes. Because I could hear the scream. It was like an audible, the tree was like, ah! It was like an audible shout. I guess if you're hacking it slowly, it's the same thing. But this one is just like such an abrupt. Yeah.
This intrigues me, the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, going through the different steps, and when the child comes from the mother's womb, the voice cries out from one end of the world to the other, and its sound is not audible. It's not audible saying from one end to the other, but the sound is audible. So it's just the expansion of the sound, we don't hear it, but we just hear it within the midst of the sound. What's the spiritual teach me that's expressed here? And 6 also, I'm just curious, 6 voices, what's the inner meaning of this? This seems to be very, very profound, this text. And if you can unwrap it.
What do you think? What do they all have in common?
They all have, and the thing that they have in common is not having an audible sound.
Mm-hmm.
And coming from one, and this all saying from one end to the other, and it seems like it's going through the stages, just there's a birth process going on here also.
Can I suggest something?
Sure. Oh, hi, Aaron.
Hi. It's possible that the 6 voices are the 6 directions. East, west, north, up and down.
And that's why they
that
go from one end of the world to the other?
What's that?
That's why they're going from one end of the world to the other.
Right. They're filling every dimension of physicality. And maybe that the idea of it not being heard is that it's just on a different frequency than what is audible to us. Just like we have radio waves and different frequencies of infrared and microwaves and all sorts of things that are non-audible waves that function very much like the frequencies that we do hear, but we're not attuned to them.
Thank you, Aaron.
It's beautiful. But what also about, could it be from, in terms of this, thinking of the 6 emanation, or the 6 sephirot, things are completed on the 7th. But there's something about the 6 voices. Could it?
Well, they're gates. So each one of the 6 directions are like 6 gates, and every
6 days of the week, right?
Yeah, and each one of the 6 days of the week is a voice, as opposed to Shabbat, which is silence.
Right.
And each one of the 6 directions is like a gate where things come in and out of. And the thing that's in common with all of these is that they're coming through a gate, right? So like the child is not dying, the tree is dying, and the soul's leaving the body, right? But the child doesn't seem to belong there because it's getting born. But the thing in common with all of them is they're changing states. They're walking through a gate. They're moving from one thing. And when you go through a gate, it hurts. Or else you probably didn't go through the gate, right?
Right.
There's obviously, I think on one level it's an intellectual exercise, but on another level it's literally you can hear it, like if you're there, like if you were out of Earth, I know you were. There's an audible sound that goes out, not from the baby. It's from the ringing of the gate, of the transformation. It's like when someone passes away, it's like you can hear it, but it's I have a giant desire to finish these last 2, so I'm going to do it. Okay. Now this is Rabbi Uri, and he is giving a sort of biomimicry about human growth, spiritual growth. So one should work, always doing full and honest labor in order to rise step by step in the service of Hashem. But do not look back every few minutes to see if you are progressing. For a person is like a tree. And I just want to say that even though in the Torah it says that a person's not like a tree, right? That line, it says that a person is not like a tree, meaning the tree can't run away. But what's obvious in that assumption is that it's giving personhood to the tree. It just doesn't have legs. So, therefore, a person is like a tree. That's the Jewish reading. Because it's assuming a person is like a tree. A tree is a person. It just doesn't have legs. So, therefore, a person is like a tree. And do you look at a tree continual to see how it's growing? If you did, you would see nothing and you'd become tired of looking. Unless you prune it and protect it and trim it and fertilize it and water it and protect it from damage and danger and strong winds, then the tree will grow and prosper and become beautiful. So must one rid yourself of all things which ruin you. Intend all the qualities that aid you in the service of Hashem, meaning in your creativity and in your life growth, so that you will grow and prosper. It is, however, not a virtue to measure from hour to hour how much they have grown. So don't assess yourself on how much you've grown, because it doesn't have to do that to a tree. Just prune it and trim it and choose the good, but it doesn't help a tree. That's not what a gardener of a tree does. It doesn't sit there assessing the tree. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai received the Torah from Hillel and Shammai, and he used to say, this is direct transmission of Torah in the Pirkei Avot, and it's being quoted by Avot the Rabbi Nachman. Same time frame. He used to say, if you have a sapling in your hand and someone should say to you that the Messiah has come, stay and complete the transplanting and then go welcome the Messiah. So as if the emphasis on trees wasn't enough in the Torah of considering it a war crime to cut down trees, modeling, you're doing body modifications for tree-like body modification, both hairstyle and body modification. The calling all wisdom the tree of life, having the main story be the tree of life, considering it the purpose of humankind to plant and tend trees, it also says that the utopian promise of Messiah, if that's offered, and just go and plant the tree. Just, if you're in the middle of planting a tree, that's more important than the Messiah coming, and then welcome after. And so there's a couple of deep ways to read it, but I want to be conscious of everybody's time. But one of them is that it's more important, like some people read that as a joke. They're like, yeah, right, Messiah is not coming, so just plant your tree, right? That literally is one of the ways of reading it. Like someone says to you, Messiah is coming, just plant your tree, do the work that you need to do. But the deeper, I guess this is funny, but is that someone says Mashiach or the Messiah is coming, yeah, plant your tree. Mashiach's coming. Because the Messianic age and utopia is described as the return of the Garden of Eden, right? That's what the Messianic age is. The earth is full of trees and people are planting and tending them. So if someone said to you, oh, Messiah's coming, you're like, yeah, Messiah's coming. Like, here I am bringing the Garden of Eden back by planting this tree. Here, yeah, you're exactly right. That's what I'm doing. And we'll continue planting the tree. So I give everyone a bracha that we should, mankind should understand their mission to tend and care for the trees of this world. And we should personally see our own personal mission and what and how that means for us, that we should be able to receive our Torah and our mitzvah to ourselves, to know how we should be creative and how we should promote life and how we should tend our garden. And I think it should, the quote in the Torah is that it's not hard to do, and it's in your heart. It's very easy. So.
Can you say that one more time, Psachyah?
Say which part?
The very last part you said.
It's not hard to do as long as it's in your heart.
la'asoso. That it is very karov elecha davar ma'od, that this thing, this mitzvah, is very close to your heart. It's in your mouth, b'ficha ulevavcha, and it's in your heart, la'asoso, to do.
Thank you.
It's not something that you need someone else to tell you. It's something that is on your lips and it's in your heart. Because that's what we were made for. Yay, trees.
Yay, trees.